Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to another explainer, where we pull back the curtain on the invisible architecture of our world. Today, we're unpacking a system that is absolutely crucial to global finance, yet it's something most of us were never taught school. We're talking about the petrodollar. This is the hidden plumbing, the underlying grid that connects your wallet to the other side of the planet.
To put things into perspective, in the year 2025, the world bought a staggering $3 trillion worth of oil. I mean, that's a number so big it's hard to even wrap your head around. But here's the really fascinating part. Almost all of it was paid for using just one single currency, the United States dollar. Now, you might be wondering, why? It wasn't necessarily because the dollar was the strongest or the most stable money at the time. Actually, it traces back to a very specific, quiet deal made in a Saudi desert. To understand why global money works the way it does today, we've got to understand how this $3 trillion habit started in the first place.
Section 1. The dollar without gold and the 1970s financial crisis. Let's step back in time.
Let's move to and see how this builds. To understand the massive financial problem America was facing before the petrodollar even existed, we really have to look at the rapid breakdown of the post-World War II financial system. Under the old rules, the US dollar was reliably backed by gold, but America had been printing way more dollars than it had gold in its vaults to pay for things like the Cold War. Countries noticed, and they started knocking on America's door, demanding their gold back. So, in August 1971, President Nixon abruptly slams the gold window shut. Fast forward just a bit to October 1973. The Yom Kippur War breaks out, the US backs Israel, and OPEC responds by using the absolute most powerful weapon they have, oil. They slash production and embargo the United States. Oil prices completely exploded, jumping from $3 to nearly $12 a barrel. Gas stations literally ran dry. Nixon famously said, "I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold." Once that window shut, it meant that the dollar was now backed by absolutely nothing but trust. And well, right at that exact moment in the 1970s, trust was incredibly scarce. Inflation was getting ugly, and the world's most vital commodity was actively being weaponized against the US. America desperately needed a new plan, a new anchor for its currency. Something so essential that the whole world would have absolutely no choice but to keep using US dollars.
Which brings us to Section 2, Birth of the Petrodollar, and the 1974 Saudi deal.
Mentor, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. He proposes this brilliant, high-stakes trade to create a new undeniable anchor for the currency. You see, Saudi Arabia was sitting on the world's largest pool of oil. Great for them, right? But it also made them a massive target out in the middle of the desert. So the US agrees to provide weapons, keep the kingdom safe, and physically protect those oil fields. In return, Saudi Arabia agrees to price and sell all of its oil strictly in US dollars. And crucially, this is the big one. They agreed to invest any extra money they made right back in the US Treasury bonds. Within a year, the rest of OPEC followed suit, and the petrodollar was officially born. If you wanted energy, you first needed dollars.
Section 3. How petrodollars are recycled and the global financial loop.
You know, the real genius here wasn't just forcing countries to buy their energy in dollars. It was the perpetual financial machine it created afterward, a process formerly known as petrodollar recycling. This is the process where oil exporting nations take their surplus US dollars and reinvest them directly back into US Treasury bonds and American markets. Exporters like Saudi Arabia suddenly had a problem most of us would love to have, way more dollars than they could possibly spend at home. So they channeled them straight back into American debt.
Let's walk through exactly how this brilliant financial loop works step by step. Step 1. Oil is priced globally in dollars. Japan wants oil? They need dollars. Germany wants oil? Dollars. This creates constant, massive global demand. Step 2. Exporters accumulate giant piles of those dollars. And Step 3. Those dollars are reinvested right back into US debt. This helps finance US government spending, keeps interest rates low, and ironically funds the very military that protects the oil fields, keeping the whole cycle going. America doesn't even need to sell oil. It just needs the world to use dollars to buy it.
So, the crucial point is, this recycling machine gave the US what economists call an exorbitant privilege. By the 1980s, this was an incredible economic superpower. Because the entire world had to hold dollars to buy energy, the dollar became the ultimate global safe asset. This allowed the United States to borrow cheaply, run huge deficits, print money, and push much of its inflation onto everyone else. It was a perfectly legal, massive financial advantage.
Section 4. The weaponization of currency and the danger of disconnection.
But here's the catch. This dollar infrastructure doubles as a devastating geopolitical weapon. The dollar isn't just money anymore. It's the infrastructure, the banking. It's the financial internet itself. Being sanctioned and cut off from the dollar system means losing access to the global trade grid. It's not just an inconvenience. It causes economies to simply stop working.
And historically, we can map out a pretty distinct pattern of what happens when countries try to bypass this system. In 2000, Saddam Hussein proposed selling Iraqi oil in euros. By 2003, there was an invasion, and oil sales returned to US dollars. Libya's Gaddafi proposed a gold dinar backed by a massive 143 tons of gold for African oil trade. A 2011 NATO intervention followed, and the plan died. Then, in 2018, Venezuela launched the Petro-Crypto project to dodge sanctions. By January 2026, a U.S. military operation captured Maduro. Now, obviously, these events involve a complex mess of motives, humanitarian issues, regional politics, weapons concerns. But neutrally speaking, the historical pattern of attempting to leave the dollar and subsequently facing uncomfortable geopolitical outcomes is really hard to ignore.
Section 5. 1,000 small challengers and the shift away from the dollar. Let's look at what's happening right now.
For 50 years, the petrodollar's dominance was basically undisputed, but modern challengers are rising, and a massive shift kicked into high gear in 2022. When the U.S. froze nearly $300 billion in Russian foreign reserves and blocked them from the SWIFT banking system, it sent a shockwave. It deeply scared other nations into realizing their money was only theirs as long as the U.S. agreed. Suddenly, China starts actively dropping its U.S. Treasury holdings from $1.3 trillion down to roughly $600 billion. Russia and China start trading heavily in rubles and yuan. And even Saudi Arabia, the very architect of the petrodollar system, has publicly opened the door to trading in non-dollar currencies. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact result of that shift. Look at this visual. The US dollar used to sit at an incredibly dominant 72% of global reserves back in 2001. Today, it has fallen to under 58%. The Chinese yuan is small, sitting at just 2%, but hey, a decade ago, it was practically zero. The rest of the world is actively diversifying their safety nets.
And where exactly is that diversified wealth going? Well, 1,000 tons, that's a mind-blowing number. That is the record level of physical gold that global central banks aggressively hoarded in the year 2024 alone. They went on an absolute buying spree, taking possession of gold as a direct alternative to holding their wealth in US dollars.
But you know, the ultimate structural threat to the system might not even be other currencies or gold. The Petrodollar Foundation relies entirely on global dependence on oil to function. The machine requires dollars to buy oil. But look at the electric future. By 2025, 1 in 4 cars sold globally is electric. If the world simply stops needing as much oil, the fundamental machine that forces the globe to buy dollars naturally starts breaking down.
So, is the dollar dead? Actually, scratch that. It's not dead at all. The machine definitely still runs. The US dollar still dominates a massive 88% of foreign exchange transactions, and it handles roughly half of all global trade invoicing. Right now, there is absolutely no single rival, whether it's the yuan, the euro, gold, or crypto, that can replace it. But as it's been playfully phrased online, apes together strong. For the first time in half a century, the dollar isn't facing one giant challenger, it's facing an army of coordinated, smaller alternatives constantly chipping away at its foundation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the overarching question it leaves us with. If this petrodollar machine, the very system that has underpinned American economic power and global trade since 1974, finally stops running, what happens to the global financial grid? We are literally watching the architecture of money change in real time. What will the new grid look like, and who will have the power to control it? Think about that the next time you hear about global trade on the news. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.